Now let's review changes to the performance component. In the performance component, the changes are also mostly structural. We've aligned here with the real estate performance component and have added and amended metrics based on external frameworks such as GRI, DJSI, and CDP. In addition to this, we have refined our materiality approach to ensure entities report on the topics that are most material to them. All issues that are classified as no or low relevance in the materiality assessment in entity and reporting characteristics will be unscored. We have also added questions for several indicators on reporting boundaries and the external review of data. Finally, the performance indicator tables were amended to make reporting easier and clearer. As in the management component, indicators have been moved and restructured to align with the real estate performance component. Additionally, there has been further alignment of metrics with external frameworks such as GRI, DJSI, and CDP. This greatly reduces reporting burden as entities can use data that they have already collected and collated for other reporting outputs. References to these external frameworks are provided for each of the indicators, as well as links to the relevant sustainable development goals. The performance component has several indicators with performance tables. The structure of these tables has been revised in 2020. The column on previous year performance is now automatically populated, either showing the data provided by the entity in the previous year, or NA for not available if the entity didn't participate or did not provide data. The cells that are scored are shaded in green. For some indicators, different sectors have different scored metrics. In those instances, the alternative scored metric is shaded in orange. Mandatory cells can be recognized by the dark green cell border. Finally, more cells have been changed to automatically calculate correct values. This may be a total, a rate, or another sum. This automatic calculation aids entities in their data reporting and helps check data that has been put in. Note that in the portal, calculated cells may show 0 or NA until the data required for their calculation has been entered. The new aspects in the performance component are implementation, output and impact, energy, greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution, water, waste, biodiversity and habitat, health and safety, employees, customers, and certifications and awards. Let's run through the changes to the indicators in each aspect. The first aspect is implementation, which was moved from the former management and policy dimension to the performance component and considers any ESG-related actions that were implemented during the reporting year. Some new answer options have been added to allow investors to better compare actions. Entities can now give more detail about the impact of the action, both qualitative and quantitative. They can also provide information on the kind of action and the status of the action. Finally, they can indicate what the incentive was for the action and give any additional information they consider relevant to investors. Output and impact is the second aspect. Some metrics were removed to simplify reporting, but there are no other major changes. Next is energy. The energy indicator has been split into a set of questions, each opening up a table. This allows entities to focus on those parts of energy reporting that are relevant to them. New metrics have been added to align with external frameworks, and renewable energy metrics are shown in green font. Distinguishing between renewable and non-renewable throughout the tables ultimately allows for the automatic calculation of the renewable and non-renewable energy consumption metrics. Greenhouse gas emissions is the fourth aspect. Some new metrics have been added, as well as a table on Scope 3 emissions. In addition to that, new questions on the methodology behind the reported metrics have been added. These are optional in 2020. The fifth aspect is air pollution. There are no major changes in 2020. Next is water, which contains two indicators on inflows and outflows of water. There are no major changes, but we have added a few new metrics and amended some of the names to better align with external frameworks. After water is waste, and similarly, no major changes. For biodiversity and habitat, the eighth aspect, there are also no major changes. The first aspect covering social indicators is health and safety, which is split into the health and safety of employees, of contractors, of users, and of community. Some metrics were changed so that the lost time injury and total recordable injury frequency rates for employees and contractors can be calculated automatically. This will not increase reporting burden, but will increase reporting accuracy. Employees is a new aspect. It includes an indicator on employee engagement that has been created by merging indicators on employee training and employee satisfaction monitoring. Some metrics were also added to align with the real estate assessment. Customers is also a new aspect, but there have been no major changes to the indicators included. The final aspect in the performance component is certifications and awards. There are no changes in 2020. This brings us to the changes to how exceptions to the reporting boundaries should be reported and the external review of data in 2020. Setting and describing appropriate boundaries for reporting on ESG is critical to allow data to be collected and reported consistently for an entity, trends over time for an entity to be accurately observed, and to allow objective comparisons to be made between entities. GRESB intends to work with the industry to give more focus to performance measurement and scoring over the next few years. As discussed, this means that the scope of reporting will need to become more standardized. The asset assessment therefore includes indicators that help to accurately describe the boundaries of reporting for each entity. These indicators are Reporting Year EC4, which describes the temporal boundary for reporting. Sector and Geography RC3, which includes the list of asset facilities with their geolocation, thus describing the physical boundary for reporting. And Ancillary Activities RC4, which includes the list of ancillary activities undertaken by the entity, thus describing the operational boundary for reporting. The combination of these indicators provides an accurate picture of the reporting boundary. Everything within the boundary should be reported on in the relevant indicators, and everything outside the boundary should not be included. We recognize, however, that this reporting boundary may not apply to all reported ESG issues. For example, water data may not be available for certain facilities, even though energy data is. These exceptions to the reporting boundary must be described in the exception boxes included in the performance component indicators. This reporting boundary data will be carefully analyzed and used in future years to standardize the reporting boundaries for all entities in similar sectors, thereby enabling fair and equitable data comparisons and scoring. All quantitative indicators include a question on exceptions to the reporting boundaries. First, state whether or not your data for this indicator matches the temporal, physical, and operational reporting boundaries previously described. If not, you must accurately describe any exceptions in the exceptions text box. Exceptions can relate to any of the boundary dimensions. Here are some examples which you may wish to pause and review. The response to this question is unscored and is for reporting purposes only. In addition to the question on exceptions, the indicators in the aspects energy, greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution, water, waste, biodiversity and habitat, and health and safety include a question on the external review of the data. External data review adds credibility to data and makes it more reliable to use in decision-making. The review process must be completed by an independent third party, commonly a consultancy or auditing firm. Externally checked means that the data has been reviewed in a structured and consistent process. Externally verified or assured means that the review process follows an existing scheme and is in line with the standards set by the scheme. It can only be completed by an accredited professional. Select the applicable scheme using the drop-down. The question on external review is not scored in 2020. We'll now take a brief look at the changes in the validation process in 2020. There are two kinds of validation in 2020. First, there is automatic validation, which is completed as participants enter data in the portal. Error warnings will be displayed if the entered data does not meet requirements. For example, all data entered in the performance tables in the performance component must be absolute. That is to say, no negative numbers may be put in. The second kind of validation is manual. This includes the text and documents provided by the participant. For instances where participants have entered an other option, the response is checked for uniqueness. An answer can either be accepted or rejected. It is rejected if it is a duplicate of an already selected answer option, or if it does not fulfill the requirements in some other way. For evidence, there are 3 possible outcomes that may affect scoring. For each outcome, a multiplier is applied to the score for that indicator. If fully accepted, the multiplier is 1. If the evidence is partially accepted, because the evidence supports some parts of the response or indicator requirements and not others, the score is multiplied by half. If the evidence is not accepted, the multiplier is 0 and the total score is multiplied by 0 accordingly. The following indicators are subject to manual validation in 2020. This brings us to the scoring changes in 2020. Each component makes up 50% of the overall asset assessment. That means that if an asset completes both components, the scores for each component are added to give their GRESB score infrastructure asset. Materiality-based scoring affects both components. In the management component, it affects the weighting of ESG issues within indicators. For example, points are awarded for having an environmental policy that covers those issues that are material to the entity. In the performance component, materiality-based scoring affects the weighting of the indicators themselves. Each indicator in the performance component is linked to an ESG issue. Based on the materiality for that issue, entities are scored on an indicator or not. For example, if waste is considered an issue of low relevance for the entity, the indicator waste will not be scored. Of course, an entity may still decide to report data if this information is of interest to its investors. There are some indicators that are newly scored and some indicators where the scored metrics have changed. In the management component, new answer options in LE5 and new ESG issues in the policies and risk management indicators are awarded points. Under the stakeholder engagement program, points are divided over new elements of the program. In the performance component, the indicators on employee engagement, inclusion and diversity, and customers are now scored. Let's now review the participation fee. The assessment participation fee applies to all GRESB assessments. This means that infrastructure assets will need to pay a participation fee in 2020. Participants may choose to complete only one assessment component, management, performance, or development, but the standard participation fee applies regardless. First-year participating entities and entities headquartered in non-OECD countries can participate in the GRESB assessment without paying the participation fee. The entity will be benchmarked and will receive a free scorecard and will have the option of purchasing a benchmark report, which is the same rate as the participation fee. Note that first-year participants will only have this option in their first year. Other products and services, like response checks, customized benchmark reports, training seats, etc., are no longer bundled with the assessment participation fee. This allows participants to select only those products and services that they require. And finally, let's take a look at the 2020 timeline. The assessment portal will be open from April 1st to August 1st, midnight Pacific Daylight Time. Note that we have extended the deadline in 2020, and other dates may change in the future. We are monitoring the situation around COVID-19 and will communicate any further amendments to the timeline well in advance. We have tried to minimize the number of changes in 2020, focusing instead on the new structure. Where possible, we have merged indicators or restructured them to make it easier to navigate the assessment. None of the newly added indicators are scored in 2020. Thank you for taking the time to complete this lesson. We hope that it helped you get a better understanding of the changes to the GRESB asset assessment and prepared you to complete the assessment accurately. For any questions, you can contact us at gresb.com/contact.